Yeah, we're on now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're delighted to have you all here and can't wait to get into the session. My name is Titiksha. I'm the video content manager at ZNotes, and I'll be your host for today. This event is brought to you by ZNotes, an education platform built by students for students. ZNotes provides free, high-quality education resources and peer-to-peer learning to address global educational inequality. Thanks to our passionate and supportive student community, we have reached nearly 5 million learners worldwide and continue to grow our student numbers and impact. This webinar is part of our wider Uni Guide series designed to support students on their journey towards higher education by providing them with essential information, expert insights, and dedicated advice. Today's event is presented in partnership with Meto, a tech based nonprofit focused on making higher education accessible to all, especially lower income students. We're delighted to have them involved. Today's topic is how to apply to the US, UK, and Canada. We'll be discussing the key details for each country, the different application processes, and how to select the right institutions for you. Meto have sourced application officers from across these countries who are here to talk to you in more detail on these topics. Thank you all for joining. Before we dive in, I'd like to remind everyone that there's a dedicated Q&A session at the end. So please share your questions in the chat at any time, as we'll be answering these in the final third of the session. Now I'd like to hand over to Hayat from Meto to introduce herself and the speakers for today.
Great. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Hayat, and I'm the co-director of partnerships at Meto. And we are joined by 3 universities here today who will be giving some insight into what it's like to study in the UK, Canada, as well as the US. I'm going to, for the sake of time, I'm going to hand over to our first representative, Donna, who will be speaking a little bit about what it's like to study in the UK. Donna, I'll let you introduce yourself and get right into it.
Thank you so much, Haya. It's really lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting us. So today I am representing the UK, but I am based at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. And I have lots to get through today to discuss with you about this experience. So hopefully we can answer some of your questions through this, but obviously we can bring up anything else in the Q&A. Now, why would you choose to study in the UK? Well, there's lots of reasons. We would argue it's one of the best possible starts to your particular chosen career. There is a great deal of choice, types of institution, locations, and also subjects available. So whether that's something like engineering or business or medicine, or something more niche such as brewing and distilling, or some of the literature courses have very focused areas, for example. So there is a wide range of choice available to you. The experience of learning in the UK is not just about the academic qualification, though. It is about the overarching experience and what that provides you. We talk about having real world learning. So we are giving you applied learning that you will then take into the industry that you choose to work in. And speaking of industry, our universities have top tier connections with industry across the board. So whether that means you could develop a placement as part of your studies or an internship after graduation, or whether it's about building a network of contacts, you will have these opportunities relevant to the industry that you have chosen. You will also have access to state-of-the-art facilities across the different universities. So a couple of examples would be at my university, we have NASA robots in our School of Informatics, or at the University of Glasgow, you have access to fantastic wind tunnel facilities if you're studying aeronautical engineering. So it's all about giving you the tools and the facilities to learn that you will then take into the real world. And then just to highlight that although we are smaller than some of the other countries you may be considering geographically, and we represent about 0.9 of the global population, but when it comes to scientific research, the UK actually represents 14% of the world's most highly cited research in the world. So that is we're a powerhouse in that sense when it comes to scientific research. So you will benefit from all of these different experiences. And then if you choose to, you can potentially stay in the UK for 2 years after you have graduated. And there is no job specific requirement to do that. You can take that time to do placements or gain experience in UK industries before you then head home to reap the rewards of your investment. So what can you do when you're studying in the UK? Well, there is, again, quite a large amount of choice, but thinking about it, most of the degrees in the UK are 3 to 4 years at bachelor's degree. And you'll note that I've highlighted on the side of the slide, in Scotland, it is a 4-year degree. This is a crucial difference from the rest of the UK, where it is a standard 3-year bachelor's degree. And you will see that reflected in the course content. Now, even despite that standard 3 to 4 year system, there are exceptions that are important to note. So something like veterinary medicine or medicine or dentistry is going to be longer because of the placements that degree requires. You then have sandwich degree options. So a sandwich degree is maybe 2 or 3 years at university, a 1-year break to do an industry placement, and then a final year or final 2 years, depending on the structure. And then you have an integrated master's option. These are quite common in engineering or within the sciences, such as physics or chemistry or something like that. And that would be the combined bachelor's and master's level study, but in an integrated fashion. So it would mean that you would start studying at bachelor's level, but graduate at master's level, which may appeal to you. It will probably involve industrial engagement, but they can sometimes have higher entry requirements and be more competitive for entry. Broadly speaking, the UK system starts in September, October for an academic year. So we are just about to welcome our next cohort here at Edinburgh, who will be starting in a week or so. And then the end of the academic year for bachelor students generally finishes around May or June time. Now, within our study, we really do focus on independent study. So your class time might be that, say, you're doing a history degree, you may be doing maybe 12 to 15 hours of class a week, but you will be making that a full-time qualification with the independent learning that you will be doing. So it is not part-time if you're only in class for 12 to 15 hours. You will have a lot of independent work and assignments to work on alongside that. Again, class time will vary depending on courses, but the whole purpose of this is to develop critical thinkers, and this is crucial to this real world learning that you are getting. We want you to engage with the material, we want you to engage with your academics, and if you don't agree with them, then you raise it, you discuss it, you challenge things. Academics want you to be thinking outside of the box in every field of study. So moving on from this, the questions really about how you choose your university. So again, we're small but mighty. We have 160 universities to choose from. And really how you decide where you study will depend on your preferences to a certain extent. So what kind of location are you looking for? Is it a small town, a big city, a parkland campus, a city-based campus? These are all variable for your preferences, and there is every possible variation across the UK. What kind of student experience are you looking for? What kind of accommodation do you want to stay in? Do you want an individual room? Do you want a shared room? Do you want to have a kitchen that you share, or do you want to do that on your own? And what kind of student body are you looking for? Do you want a large institution, or perhaps one that is smaller and perhaps more focused on those particular areas of study? Your degree options are crucial, obviously, not the only choice that you would be making, but how do you decide whether that subject is right for you or not? And the same business degree, perhaps a bachelor's in business, is not likely to be exactly the same in the content. So you should be comparing the content of the degree as well. Does it offer you opportunities to go abroad if that's of interest to you? Do you want to do a placement year? Is that within the degree structure? And is there any flexibility? Something like medicine is likely to be very, very focused, but then you might find the flexible degree structure in Scotland, for example, allows you to change degrees within, say, humanities and social sciences within the first 2 years of study. So that may appeal to you more if you're not 100% on the subject that you've chosen. Rankings are important guides, but not the only decision factor, I would argue. They can guide you on teaching standards and research activity, but they may miss out some of the more niche subject areas and may not reflect the entire student experience. And each ranking system is different. So you should use them to guide you, but I wouldn't say they're the final decision maker. And then ultimately costs. So it's crucial you don't miss out on costs. Can you afford not just the tuition fees, but also your living expenses? Because it would not be a fun experience to be able to pay for tuition and then struggle to meet your accommodation costs. So these are very important factors that I'd be encouraging you to research. Understanding the criteria for entry is also essential, and this will vary by university and is a significant part of your research. So in the UK, we will publish entry criteria for overarching criteria and then have required subjects within that. Now, at my university, the required subjects are black and white. If you do not have them, you cannot study that subject. So for example, engineering, like this example, would require math and something like physics. In some cases, some universities may require physics. And if you're not doing those, you will not be able to enter into that subject field because quite simply, you will not have the knowledge to do the degree. Some courses are more flexible than others. Some institutions are more flexible. But it's not just about the grades. There are items such as the personal statement that you need to look after and prepare for, as well as potentially other items such as English tests or the medicine aptitude tests like UCAT or BMAT. And then there may be a portfolio requirement for creative subjects such as art and design, or interviews for things like medicine or for teaching qualifications. So research is really key so that you know well in advance what is required and how you can prepare for these things. There is lots of support for all of these different elements across university web pages and UCAS itself. So speaking of UCAS, UCAS is the University and Colleges Admission Service in the UK, and every UK university will use this system. Some universities may also allow Common App or a direct application, but I would be recommending if you're applying to more than one university in the UK that you apply through the UCAS system. Within that system, you can apply up to 5 different courses. Now, that could be 5 courses at the same university or 5 completely different universities and completely different degrees. But you must remember that the same personal statement is used for all 5. So it is important to be relatively strategic in your choices and make sure that you have prepared that carefully. You do need to make sure you also meet the deadlines, and I will highlight those deadlines shortly. But if there is one piece of information I can get across to you today, it is not to leave your application to the last minute. If anything, it will just make you stressed. And if you're stressed, then you may not give your best in your application. But it would allow you for more flexibility to take your time to make decisions. Thinking about the deadlines, I'm just highlighting the key ones here, but I would expect you to do research about your specific choices when it comes to that. So for this is for 2025 entry. So we are just about to open applications for 2025 on UCAS. If you're applying to a UK conservatoire, so this would be if you're applying to a very focused institution, a conservatoire deals with things like music and performance, and therefore requires auditions, etc. Therefore, their deadline is the earliest at the 2nd of October. If you're applying to Oxford, Cambridge, or a clinical course such as medicine, dentistry, or vet med, then you will need to meet that 15th of October deadline. And to be perfectly clear, that is probably a hard deadline. Certainly at my university, if you miss this deadline, you will need to wait until the following year to apply again. For most other courses, the deadline is the equal consideration deadline of the 29th of January. So that actually should say 2025. So the 29th of January 2025, that's my mistake. The equal consideration deadline means that everybody that applies up to that deadline has to be considered for that degree. And it's at that point UK universities can close programs. So there is no guarantee that your program of choice will still be open after that date. So I would encourage anybody to try and meet that deadline if they can. So just to sort of bring it back to some of the things I've covered here, I've used my own university as an example of the things that you could be considering as part of your decision making when it comes to the UK. So my university is 27th in the world. We are a large university. We have close to 50,000 students at the University of Edinburgh, and we have a large portfolio, but we don't teach everything. So for example, if you were looking for physiotherapy, my university doesn't offer that option. So you would have to explore based on what it is you're trying to find. We are a city centre based campus. We are literally in the heart of Edinburgh city centre, but that may not be the experience that you're seeking. You may prefer a parkland campus, for example. We are a Scottish university, so what that means is it would be a 4-year bachelor's degree. And we have different kinds of bachelor's options, an MA honours, which would perhaps be a social science like history, or maybe a more creative course. You have the Bachelor's of Engineering, but we also have integrated Masters in Engineering and Sciences. And then you have the Bachelor of Science options as well. But as a Scottish degree, you would potentially benefit from our flexible degree options, as I mentioned earlier. But we are highly sought after and therefore is competitive for entry. What that means is likely our courses will close after that equal consideration deadline. So just trying to give you some perspective on how you would choose your institution of choice. Okay, so I will stop there. It's a lot of information to take in, so happy to take questions later. But if you do wish to reach out to the University of Edinburgh, please feel free to use this email address here. And thank you very much for having me today.
Hello. Thank you, Donna. It was really nice to learn from you. I'm going to wait just a moment until my slides are shared, but my name is Holly Buttry, and I'm the Director of International Admission at the University of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida. And so we are coming across the Atlantic over to the US, and I want to speak with all of you today about when the US could be a good option. I think you will hear some similarities to what Donna was saying with the UK, and also some wide differences, not just between the US and the UK, but even within the US itself. So I would encourage you to think about 3 different aspects when deciding if the US is a good option. The first of which, of course, is academics. If you are seeking academic flexibility, the US could be a really great spot for you. This was actually on Donna's slides, but there are many institutions across the US where you have 2 full years to kind of try out different disciplines, where you get to taste, to explore before declaring a major. That is not what happens at my institution, but certainly is available at many colleges and universities. And so, again, if you're undecided in what you want to study, but you know that you want to do more school, you want to engage in research, you want to continue your education, that academic component could be really a wonderful fit for you in the US. Additionally, in the United States, there are quite literally thousands of institutions to explore. We have small private institutions, large public institutions. They truly range from a few hundred total students to 80,000 total students. And so what you will find across these institutions is simply that: options. It will be, of course, your prerogative to do research, but when considering the thousands of institutions available, it is very likely you will find what you are seeking academically. Additionally, throughout the United States, you will find many world-class and highly ranked colleges and universities. As Donna noted, rankings are not the be-all, end-all. There are some rankings that can be really helpful and others that may not be as salient for you as an individual, as a student. But what you will also find academically at colleges and universities across the United States are cutting-edge facilities, the access to undergraduate research. Lots of the academic focus is on that undergraduate experience, those bachelor's degrees, both Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Fine Arts, as well as Bachelor of Science degrees. And so one way to think about if the US could be a good landing spot for you would be through the academics available. Additionally, thinking about career trajectory. In the United States, you will perfect your English. Certainly, there are varieties on the English language spoken throughout the country, but our institutions are conducted in English. This can also bolster future international exchange. You will find that on US campuses, there are many international students. About 9% of the students who attend college in the US are international. They are visa seeking, perhaps like yourself. And so you will be surrounded by students who are different from you, students who bring perspectives beyond your own, and you will also be adding your perspective to these multicultural, multilingual, multi-ethnic campuses. This can also help you in terms of intercultural communication down the line. Many US colleges and universities offer co-ops or internships as part of their academic program as well. This allows for you to try out career prospects before you graduate. Specifically, there is a CPT option within F1 visa regulations that allow for students to engage in these internships, even as a non-US citizen. Additionally, similar to what Donna was describing, we have OPT, optional practical training following graduation for our F1 visa holders. And that it does depend on the course of study that you follow. But again, there are career supports both while you are a student and after graduation here in the United States. Finally, if you are thinking, why would I study in the US? If you want to build out a resume with multicultural experiences, that certainly will happen on your college campuses. And this bleeds into that support piece. So you will be supported in terms of your academics. You will be supported in terms of career aspirations. The US college experience, the US university experience is also one that is robust outside of the classroom. This means comprehensive student supports. International student orientations are the norm. Multicultural organizations, athletics, clubs. There are many ways for students to get involved beyond their academics, and many of our campuses are residential in nature and build out that community for you. This also means support from professors, being a known entity, and the opportunity to seek out one-on-one relationships with those professors. Additionally, if you are looking specifically for a residential experience, if you are looking specifically for the fireworks that come along with touchdowns at American football games, these can be part of your undergraduate experiences in the US. And then finally, financial support. Just as Donna was saying, there is no single formula for financial aid and scholarships for students in the US. But if you are willing to investigate what financial aid and scholarships are available to international students, you can often find robust support there as well. So academics, career trajectory, and then support for the person, I think, are reasons to consider the US in terms of study. But because there are so many options, it will be important, your prerogative, to figure out what is a good fit. And so you've probably noticed I've been using both the word college and university. And sometimes I think that can be a stumbling block for students. I work a lot with students in Latin America, and in particular, if you're thinking about a colegio, it might be a false cognate, a high school and a college. A college in the US is not the same as a secondary school. Colleges, on the whole, are institutions that confer bachelor's degrees. These are institutions really focused on that 4-year undergraduate degree. They are generally not going to be offering master's degrees or PhDs. Generally as well, a college is going to be smaller and often with residential requirements. So colleges and universities in the US both offer that bachelor's degree. In general, colleges only offer bachelor's degrees and are a little bit smaller. And when I say smaller, I mean 2,000 students, 3,500 students, maybe 1,500 students. And so still a population in which you will have robust experiences, but not quite as large as the university setting. The University of Miami, where I work, we are considered a mid-size university. And we have 12,000 undergraduate students. So that's in the middle. And so when you think about universities, these institutions generally confer many degrees. This might be bachelor's, master's, PhDs, MDs, doctoral degrees in general. But you will always complete that bachelor's degree first. I know in some countries around the world, I just got back from a trip to Brazil, and students were asking about law, about medicine, because you can go directly from your secondary school study into law, into medicine. In the United States, you do need to complete your bachelor's degree and then do your law school and then do your medical school. In general, universities in the US have larger student bodies. Again, 12,000 is mid-size here at the University of Miami. And also universities may come with commuter populations. I mentioned that residential component to most colleges in the US. And so the idea of a commuter population would be students who are living off campus, whether that's living at home with your family or siblings, or it's just living at an apartment or somewhere off campus and coming in. So those both colleges and universities, options for bachelor's degrees in the US. And so thinking about fit, I would encourage you, given the literal thousands of options, to do lots of research. And when I say fit, I mean financial fit, intellectual fit, and then what things do you want to be doing outside of the classroom? Financially, college in the United States, university in the United States will look very expensive. It may also be very expensive. There are some institutions with incredibly robust financial aid policies, and there are some institutions with less robust financial aid policies for non-US citizens. And so investigating when you are looking at colleges and universities in the US, what kind of scholarship opportunities exist? And furthermore, what is available for a non-US citizen? Do they need? Do they consider merit? Thinking about intellectual fit. And this is similar to what Donna was saying. Not every institution offers the same set of courses. And so intellectually, does this institution offer you what you want and need? Are you going to go to a place where you get to explore for 2 years and then make a decision? Or do you already know and want to apply directly into a major? And then finally, how do you want to grow and fill your time outside of the classroom? What things do you want to be involved in? Do you want sports and tailgates? Do you want clubs and organizations? Do you want to be, like Donna was saying, in the middle of a city, access to museums and art and theater? Finding that right fit will take research. Again, in the US, there are over 4,000 different colleges and universities to consider. With all of those institutions, the process to apply is not solidified into one option. The process to apply will look different depending on where you apply. We do not have a UCAS. We have over 1,000 institutions on the common application, but even within what sounds the same with common, the common application is only used by 1,000 some schools. And also, those schools will have different requirements within the common application. There are also institutions that have their own proprietary applications, like the University of Texas system. There is also the coalition application available. While UCAS offered 5 institutions, the common app will go up to 20. Like Donna was outlining in the UK, you can find in the US as well. Requirements will depend on the institution. I've tried to list some of the things that you will be asked for here. Certainly transcripts. We are all institutions of higher learning, and so academics are going to be first and foremost in our review. We're going to look at activities, how you have filled your time, perhaps a letter or letters of recommendation. Students will submit a personal essay, just like with UCAS on the Common App. The essay that you submit will go to all of the different institutions. Therefore, some institutions may ask for a supplemental essay or essays. In the US, there are some institutions that require standardized testing, like the SAT or ACT. There are some institutions for which standardized testing is optional, and there are some institutions where they are test blind. They will not consider your standardized testing. So I encourage you to look at that. Of course, English proficiency will be a part for many non-US citizens who have grown up speaking a language other than English, as well as application fees. Many schools will charge you to submit your application. And so when you're thinking about financial fit, that could be another component. In addition, the deadlines are not the same across the board. I think Donna did a really lovely job of outlining for you what some might be in the UK, and I've attempted to do the same here. What I also think is important is the vocabulary that we use in the US is fairly specific. So for example, we have early decision deadlines. Early decision is what we call a binding round of admission. Early decision means that you will attend the institution you are applying to. You sign a contract, a parent or guardian signs a contract, and your school counselor signs a contract. That is 3 people agreeing that if admitted, you will attend the institution you're applying to through early decision. Often you will find early decision in November. as well as early decision in January. There are some instances where institutions will only have one early decision round or no early decision rounds. But early decision tends to be, as it sounds, an earlier date, often at the beginning of November. In the US, we also have early action. So early action and restrictive early action, again, generally take place in November. Early action is a non-binding round of admission, but it allows you to understand your options a little earlier. Restrictive early action is most often seen in highly selective institutions, and it is non-binding in that it's early action, but you can only apply to one school during early action if you're going through restrictive early action. And so the specifics on that you will want to investigate. Most institutions will have a regular decision deadline. Regular decision, as it sounds, is probably the most common way that students apply, and that's often in January. There's also rolling admission. There are many institutions that don't have hard and fast deadlines. They review applications as they are received. If they are a Common App institution, Common Application opens on August 1, and applications can be submitted anytime therein. So getting back to the research, it is very important to understand what kind of round you're applying through and the deadline for that round. Finally, I did want to talk about financial aid availability, which again depends on the institution. In the US, you'll hear about need-based financial aid as well as merit-based financial aid. Need-based financial aid is not necessarily met for non-US citizens at many colleges and universities. There are some forms that you will be asked to complete. These may include the CSS profile, which is the College Scholarship Search Profile, the ISFA, which is the International Student Financial Aid Application, a financial certification form that's specific to the institution. And then if you are a US citizen, dual citizen, or US permanent resident, you may be asked to submit the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. Some institutions will also offer merit-based financial aid for non-US citizens. They may require an additional essay or an interview in order to be eligible. They may have specific GPA or academic or activity requirements. For example, are you part of the physics Olympiad? Have you had a specific GPA? These may be qualifications. For merit-based aid, there may be specific rounds or dates by which you need to apply in order to be eligible. And then finally, some merit-based aid requires a recommendation from a counselor. So this will mean that you need to pay attention to dates as well as be communicative with the folks who are supporting you. Finally, I wanted to give you an example of what this all might look like. And I do encourage you, I think similarly to Donna, to be really organized. Find a way to be organized that works well for you. You are going to need to track dates. You are going to need to track pieces to the application, supplemental essays, etc. And so when you consider college in the United States, it will take some heroic organization, I do believe, in order to be your most successful. So I'm going to offer examples from the University of Miami. This is what we require for students to complete an application. We would need that common application. We also need a supplemental essay. We need a high school transcript sent by a school official. If your transcript is not in English, we need a translation. We need a school report, one letter of recommendation, English language proficiency, financial certification form. We are test optional for the SAT and ACT, though there are some instances where it would be required. You can see, for example, applicants to the School of Architecture at the University of Miami who do not provide an SAT or ACT must submit a portfolio. If you don't have a portfolio, you therefore must submit an SAT or ACT. Finally, what do our deadlines look like? So again, considering the organization that needs to take place, here is what our admission plans and deadlines look like. You can see there are a lot of dates here, and they are dependent on the plan and on the deadline. And so I again encourage you to be incredibly organized. I encourage you to be very thoughtful based on the research related to the institutions you apply to, because it will be quite a bit of work, but I think ultimately the US can be a great landing spot for students based on those academic, career, and support mechanisms that they're looking for. Just like Donna, happy to have continued conversation related to university in the US. I offer this contact information, but with that, I will turn it over to my colleague from Canada.
Good morning, good afternoon from wherever you're joining us from. We are the friendly neighbors to the north of the US. My name is Leah. I'm an international admissions and recruitment officer at Carleton University in the beautiful city of Ottawa, Canada. I'm excited to share a little bit about what Canada has to offer, and I will echo a lot of what has been said before by my colleagues Holly and Donna, who've given great presentations about the US and the UK. We have a lot of similar offerings, but we might differ in certain areas. I see you all have a lot of good questions, so I'll make sure to go through my presentation as quickly as possible, just to leave enough room to go through all of the great questions you have. So when it comes to Canada, I'm sure there's a lot of things that come to mind when you think about Canada. And I'd love to see in the chat, like, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of Canada? Like, Canada is a big country. It has 10 provinces and three territories. So when you're looking at Canada, you will have your choice of options as to where you go and study. Some provinces are a bit smaller. Some provinces are a bit bigger. Some provinces have smaller cities. Some provinces have really big cities, like you have your Toronto, but you may also have some cities like Kingston. So as echoed earlier, when you're looking at a university, you're also looking at the city you're going to. Are you the kind of person who maybe thrives in a smaller environment? Maybe you might find Toronto a bit overwhelming, but you might really thrive in a smaller city like Kingston, where the population is not as big. So when you're looking at Canada, there are many different factors to consider. One thing I did not mention, but you probably saw in my presentation, is I welcomed you both in English and French. Canada is an officially bilingual country. So oftentimes when you're moving around Canada, you will notice everything is written in English and French. So some provinces are a bit more French speaking than others. So for example, if you're looking to go into Montreal, you're in the province of Quebec. That is a very French speaking city. So you'll have to take that into consideration when you're applying to universities. For students who are looking to study in French, you have a lot of great opportunities in Canada. We have certain universities that are only French speaking. We have certain universities that are bilingual, and we have universities that are fully English speaking as well. So that's something that you consider as well when you're looking at studying in Canada. One great thing to note as well is some universities offer a reduced tuition if you're going to do your degree in French. In order to encourage just the French language in the country, many universities offer incentives for that. So if you are a fully French-speaking individual and you know you can do your degree in French, you might benefit from certain scholarships like that. When you're looking at provinces in Canada, certain things to highlight as well is the cost of living. The cost of living might differ in certain cities compared to others. So that might be something you take into consideration. This is a map of Canada, so it just kind of shows you a little bit of some of the different cities here. I like to emphasize this map because we are in the province of Ontario. So my university is located a bit in the south of Canada. We're very close to the US, so it's an hour flight to New York from where we are. It's actually easier for me to get to New York than it is for me to get to Vancouver within the same country. So that just shows you how big Canada is. Within Canada, we experience 4 different seasons. So I saw in the chat, someone said, Canada is cold. We do experience winter, we do experience fall, we do experience summer, and we do experience spring. All 4 seasons bring with it so many different things. But when I go on the road often, the first question I get is, how cold is Canada? I came as an international student, so I moved from a very warm country. So I was also hesitant about the cold, but one thing I'll say is that Canada comes alive in the winter. There's so many fun things to do, so many great sports, so many fun activities. We are located in the city of Ottawa, and in the winter, we have a large outdoor skating rink. It's the largest outdoor skating rink in the world. So you can actually skate about an hour just skating on the canal. It's a great winter activity. You can stop and have a beaver tail. You can stop and have a hot chocolate. When someone told me beaver tail, I was like, what is beaver tail? It has nothing to do with the beaver tail, but it's a great Canadian delicacy. But for anyone who's hesitant about the winter, I think that the winter brings with it a lot of fun opportunities to kind of just experience something different. If you dress well for the winter, you're not going to be too concerned about it because you wear the appropriate clothing, you're good, you're covered. So I always encourage students never cheap out on the winter gear. Wait until you come to Canada to buy your winter gear because I think you'll find winter gear here more suited for the climate compared to if you buy it at your home country. But all that to say, Canada is a big country. It's a diverse country. It's one of the first countries to officially consider itself multicultural. So one thing you'll often note when you come to Canada is that diversity. We embrace our diversity. Being an officially multicultural country, there are many people who may have immigrated to Canada from different places. So you may find people who call two different countries home. But Canada is well known for being a very welcoming environment, a very diverse, very safe environment. And I'll talk a little bit about that in my next slide when I say, why Canada? Why would you consider studying in Canada? And I apologize, I'm trying to find my mouse. Okay, so Canada is very well known for the high quality education it offers. We have around 100 different public universities in Canada. And that is something key to note because unlike many other countries, public universities are the core in Canada. So you'll notice that most institutions, like for example, some of the big institutions like University of Toronto, University of Waterloo, they are all public institutions. Canada has 100 public different universities. Being a public university means that they do receive some form of funding from the government. This funding does impact how we are providing the education. We do have to provide a certain quality education across the board in order to be eligible to receive that funding. So many universities in Canada, wherever you go, one thing I will say for sure, within our public universities, you are offered a high quality education, one that is definitely monitored, one that is definitely portable, internationally recognized. So depending on where you choose Canada, I know my colleagues mentioned rankings and they talked about it's more than just the ranking fit. One thing to note with Canada, wherever you go, you are going to be getting a quality education. I always emphasize take into consideration Canada universities are public. There are some limitations with private universities. So we do have private universities, but there may be some limitations as to whether international students can enroll in private universities or maybe some potential immigration issues that might happen if you do enroll in private universities. So I'm happy to talk a bit more about that because there are some many factors to consider. But when it comes to the education you're getting a high quality education. It's internationally recognized. So let's say, for example, you do your undergraduate degree in Canada. You can do your master's anywhere around the world and that degree would be recognized. We're flexible with our studies. I don't know if many of you have an idea of what you want to study, but if you do know what you're looking to study, but you might want to study one or more things, like you want to do a double major, Canada is very flexible in how it offers its degree offerings. So many universities offer the opportunity to do double majors. That can be 2 programs. For example, you want to do Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and Sociology. You can do a double major. Many universities also offer areas of concentration, so you can focus on a specific area. You can add a minor. We also have things like co-op work experience, which I'll talk about shortly, but there are many opportunities for you to customize your degree to suit the career goals that you might have. Canada is one of the more affordable countries to study in. So we always talk about, we want to know, it's a big investment that you're about to make. And if you're looking at Canada, you'll definitely notice the tuition does vary based on every province. So I mentioned we have 10 provinces. You might find the tuition in certain provinces is a bit higher than others. There are a lot of different factors to consider. Some provinces are a bit bigger. Some provinces are a bit smaller. You might take into consideration what is your budget. So when you're looking at Canada, it's a good idea to have an idea of how much you're able to spend when you're looking at studying abroad. because that is going to be a huge factor to consider. Donna mentioned it earlier, like you want to have enough money to be able to not just fund your tuition, but you want to be able to fund your living expenses as well. And so when you're looking at Canada, you might choose a province that might be a bit more affordable. You're not necessarily sacrificing too many opportunities, because I mentioned the quality of education across the board is high quality. A lot of the things that are being offered in some of the bigger, more expensive schools, you may find in the smaller schools, and that still fits the budget that you have. So you're not necessarily missing out on any opportunities. And I always tell students, you might go to a smaller province, do your school there, and then you can move to a bigger province once you're done. That's something to consider, because your budget is key in knowing where exactly you're going to be going. Canada is one of the few countries that really does emphasize that hands-on learning opportunities from the moment you enter. So one thing you'll often hear us talk about is co-op or cooperative education. It's very unique to Canada, but co-op allows students to take time off school to work full-time in the industry, get that experience, come back and finish their degree. So co-op can look different among different universities. Some of them might call it paid internship opportunities. But what that means is that during the course of your study, typically maybe after your second year, you will be taking time off classes and you'll be working full time. So you're doing a 9 to 5 in the industry, getting paid for that experience. Typically, some schools may ask for 3 terms, some schools may ask for 1 year, some schools may ask for a year and a half. That work experience is very valuable, because as you'll often hear is that when students graduate, they're often told, what experience do you have? And they've just graduated. So a lot of students find having co-op really does enhance their career opportunities. And universities that may not necessarily have co-op have other learning experiences, like other hands-on learning opportunities. So you may find universities are geared towards like internships. They might not be paid, but you're doing them as well as your degree. So you might have internships. You'll often hear something called practicums as well. Those are all the experiential learning opportunities that are embedded to the different programs. One thing is Canada wants to emphasize that hands-on learning opportunity. We know that it's more than just sitting in a classroom. We want to ensure that when you graduate, you have the skills you need to be able to be successful in the careers you're going into. Another key thing and another reason people choose Canada is the postgraduate work permit. It is a key selling point for Canada, because the postgraduate work permit allows you to work in Canada up to 3 years. There are a lot of changes coming with that postgraduate work permit, so it's always good to kind of stay up to date, and I recommend visiting EduCanada. That is the official Education Canada website for the government. There you can see all the different changes about what is happening, but essentially the postgraduate work permit is eligible to students who are attending a DLI institution, which is typically a public institution in Canada. You can apply to work in Canada up to 3 years. It is not tied to any specific job or any specific program right now. It could change. There's still a lot of talks and rumors about that could potentially change. But right now, as it exists, you are allowed to work after 3 years in any specific role. And then many students use that as a potential pathway to things like permanent residency or gaining work experience that they can then take to their home country or maybe apply to other countries as well. And many people consider Canada for more than just like, some students come for high school, some students come for undergraduate degrees, master's, PhD. There are many opportunities to be able to get different educational opportunities in Canada. So you can go from the high school level up until the PhD level. And a great resource that I mentioned, EduCanada, is one of the best things to look at. I think it gives up-to-date information directly from the government. So there's a lot of information out there, but if you are looking for a reliable source, EduCanada is probably the best place to start, as well as any government website for Canada. Another big reason, I know this might appeal more to the parents here, but Canada is known as one of the safest countries in the world. We are known for our safety. We are known for our friendliness. I know it might sound like a stereotype, but one thing I can definitely attest to is that Canada is really well known for being a safe and welcoming environment. We are a diverse country, so you'll notice that even our citizen population is quite diverse. But what that means for international students is that you're very likely to find a community here, a community with a similar cultural background. It's easier to make that transition when you're moving to a whole new country. You can imagine it's a big transition, but having just that diverse and socially welcoming environment does make it a bit easier to go through. Canada is known, like just in terms of like the resources and the the structure of the country. It has been known to be very socially and financially stable. When you're coming to Canada, you're going to benefit from quite a lot of different amenities, like just in terms of like how the structure of like the healthcare system, the education system, the infrastructure here is definitely known for being one of like a G7 country. So you get to benefit from a lot of the advantages that come with studying at a G7 country. And last but not least, I have mentioned the multiculturalism. Canada is an officially multicultural country, and that is kind of embedded in our DNA. So we talk about that because I think it shows you just the welcoming nature of the country you would be studying at. So I know you've heard about UCAS and Common App. Unfortunately, Canada does not have one general application platform. So when you're looking to apply to Canada in all of our different provinces, it might vary. So I will use the province of Ontario, which is where we're located, as an example. So the province of Ontario does have one common application. It's called the Ontario University Application Center. When you're looking to study in Canada, you may need to do research in whichever province you're going into. Ontario University is one of the major common applications in Canada. And then within the other provinces, it might vary. So one thing you'll find is that you might see some Canadian universities on the Common App. So if you're looking to apply to the US and you happen to notice a couple of Canadian universities, we are also on the Common App. So you might see, okay, I can apply to Canada from the Common App. Some universities do take those applications. If you're applying to Alberta, you might see Apply Alberta. That is the common application for Alberta universities. If a university doesn't have a presence in either of those platforms, you can apply directly on their website. So many universities in Canada have a direct application. Applications can cost around 100 Canadian dollars to 150. It might vary as well based on the provinces. So I'll give the example of our university. So in the University of Carleton, our application fee is $100 for 2 programs. That allows you to apply to 2 programs at the same time, and then you can put them in rank. So your first choice and your second choice. On the common application called the Ontario University Application Center, you will be looking at around 166 Canadian dollars for 3 applications. For 3 programs or 3 universities. And then if you want to add any additional university, it's 50 Canadian dollars. Now, one thing to note is that each university on these applications has an additional processing fee. So the main application will cost 166 Canadian dollars, but then you will pay a processing fee for each institution. Now that processing fee does vary. So you need to take that into consideration when you're budgeting for your applications. Now, applications requirements do vary across all the different provinces in Canada. So one thing you'll notice is that some applications are pretty straightforward. You just submit a form, answer a bunch of questions, submit that form, and then the university will tell you what documents to submit. Some universities require additional information like a supplemental form, an essay, personal statement. They might require you to submit a reference letter, a recommendation letter from your guidance counselor. It does vary. So as echoed in the previous presentations, I do recommend doing your research. If there's an institution that you're interested in, it is really key to look at what academic requirements they have. Generally speaking, all applications in Canada tend to open within September. So you'll notice a lot of applications for next year, fall 2025, will open this month. Many application deadlines will vary. One thing to note is we do keep our applications very early just because we want students to have enough time to go through the visa process. The visa process will vary based on which country you're applying from, but in general, it does take about 12 weeks to get your visa application in and to hear back from the Government of Canada or the Immigration Office. So we typically encourage students to apply by December. So for example, if you're applying for next year, application will open in September. We will recommend you apply by December of this year. That's just the recommendation. For many of you, you might be graduating this year and you don't have your documents. We offer something called early conditional offers. So what that means is that we can use your current higher level grades. So for example, if you're in grade 12, we can use your grade 12 term 1 to give you an early conditional offer. Normally that means is that your current grades are a good indication of future success in your final exams. So we'll give you an early conditional offer. That offer is conditional on you meeting the final requirements in your final grades. So with that offer, you can start the visa process. However, that offer is subject to change in the event that your final grades do not meet the requirements. Typically, that's what students do when they're applying directly from high school. If you have already graduated, then you can just submit your final documents and we can make a decision based on that. That is like a very general overview. It might vary based on each institution, but I would say it is very common to see early conditional offers with Canada. And it's very familiar, like in terms of like immigration knows it's an early conditional offer. So you might find like when you get here, they want to, you might have to show that you've satisfied the conditions of the offer you were given. Let's see if I mentioned everything. Yes. So when it comes to document submission, so many universities have different requirements. Typically, in general, we'll ask you for your high school transcripts. If you're a high school student, we'll ask you to submit a language proficiency test. So depending on which university you're applying to, we do want to make sure that you can actually cope with the demands of like either an English-speaking institution or a French-speaking institution. So there might be some form of language test you will have to provide. Some schools have waivers for this. So for example, at our school, if you did the full IB diploma or if you did the full A levels, we may waive the requirement for a language proficiency test. That is subject to change across different institutions. And one thing to also note is that we might waive the requirement, but based on your country, Immigration Canada could still ask you to submit a language proficiency test. So it's always good to know that recommendation. Once you do that, for certain programs, you might be asked to submit a portfolio. You may be asked to go through an audition process. So it's always good to leave enough room to be able to do that. So I'll use our university as an example, is we do have requirements for our nursing programs, our architecture program, our music programs, where you do have to go through interviews, portfolio requirements, or some kind of audition to be able to get into the program. Those deadlines tend to be earlier. So it's always good to take that into consideration. If you're looking at a program that might have an early deadline, the earlier you apply, the better. You don't want to wait until the very last minute to submit your portfolio. Oftentimes we see students trying to submit it at 11:55, and that always just causes issues with the system. Don't be that person. Submit it as early as possible. As I mentioned, we like to make decisions very early just because we know the visa process is a bit of a long process. So oftentimes universities will start to give out offers by February, March. So you might see your decision has been made around that time. It will vary. Like sometimes it can take 4 weeks to get a decision. It can take less. There are certain seasons where it's a bit of a peak season. So me as an admissions officer, I know between February and March, it does take a bit long to hear from like the universities. But if you apply in December, you might hear a bit quicker because not a lot of applications have come by that point. We also have different applications. You might be applying for like a scholarship, and I'll talk a bit more about scholarships in the next slide. But if you're applying for some of the high value scholarships, those deadlines tend to be much earlier. So it's always good to have your recommendation letters in, your applications, your personal statements before the deadline. The requirements for Canada, I didn't put this in the slide, but now that we've made a lot of changes with our immigration process. So when you're looking at Canada, there are certain documents you need to have from the province to be able to apply for your visa. So you need to leave enough room to be able to apply for those documents, and it will vary based on the province that you're going to. So for example, in Quebec, there's a CAQ. For other provinces, the provincial attestation letter. So you just need to make sure you have that document before you submit your visa application. And a lot of universities will help you acquire that document. Sometimes they can request it on your behalf, or you can request it directly with the province. And when it comes to funding your studies, because I know it is a big investment that you are about to make, there are many different ways that Canada can help you fund your studies. I would say when you're looking at Canada, the full ride term, it's not often you'll find a university in Canada that would give you a full ride scholarship. It's very rare, but there are some universities that give very high value scholarships. Those applications open around September as well. So it's always good to start doing your research. I know there's scholarships with some of the universities like University of Toronto. Our university does have a scholarship like that. UBC as well also has a scholarship that is a bit high value. Those scholarship applications open quite early and they close quite early. So for example, the deadline could be December 1st. It's always good to start talking to your guidance counselor if you have that resource, or maybe someone like a a university counselor outside of the school that can help you begin that process, because there is a lot that goes into those applications. It might not be a full ride, but it does cover a significant portion of your tuition and living expenses. One thing to note is that when you are applying to Canada, it is good to just have a good idea of how much you'll need, for example, for the cost of living. So for students, you might be applying to a province where the cost of living is not as expensive, but the government of Canada still needs you to show that you can afford a certain amount. So even though it might not come to that for that province, you do still need to show that you can cover the government allocated amount to be able to study in Canada. You are allowed to work in Canada while you're studying. So international students are allowed to work up to 20 hours during the school year. That is going to change to 24 hours soon, but you are allowed to work part-time off campus. Lots of jobs available on campus, so you can also just choose that. We want you to be reasonable. We don't want you to overtax yourself. So while there may not be a limit on working on campus, there is a limit to off-campus hours. And then during the holidays, you can work full-time. That is allowed and accommodated. So that does help you get a bit of extra money to finance your studies, or at least finance your living expenses. And then taking advantage of the work paid opportunities like co-op, they do pay a bit more and you are working full-time. So you can always put that towards your tuition as well. But I always tell students, it is good to be realistic about how much you can make. There is not amount of hours that you can work to pay your full tuition. So you may still need to rely on some support from your family or some support in terms of scholarships or financial aid. Some universities in Canada do offer financial aid based on need-based. It will vary across different schools. Some schools might need you to have done a year at the school before you can apply for financial aid. So I did go through by everything very quickly and very generally, but one thing to note is that when you're looking at Canada, I don't think you can go wrong with any of our public institutions. All of them are great. And that's a really big generalization, but I do attest to the fact that many of them have a lot of hands-on opportunities. Many of them prepare you for the careers that you're going into. So it's all about just finding the right fit for you. So I'm happy to talk a bit more about that. And I just want to leave some room for questions. So I'm going to end my presentation right here, but I will put my contact information here. I'm happy to set one-on-one meetings to discuss a bit more about Canada for anyone who's interested. Feel free to email me and we can talk a bit more. But thank you so much for your time, and I'll hand it over to Hyatt.
Great. Thank you so much, Leah. That was great. And thank you to Donna and Holly as well for very comprehensive introductions to what it's like to study in the UK, the US, and Canada as well. So we have about just under 30 minutes left, I believe, for the session. So I'm going to quickly introduce Meto and the service that we provide, and then we will use the rest of the time for the questions that have been sent in the chat. So if you do have more questions to ask, please do put them in the chat. All right, so Meto is an online platform that reverses the university search process. This is a nonprofit organization, and so the way in which we work is it's a free platform for students and high schools. So the idea behind Meto is essentially, instead of you having to identify which universities to apply to, universities approach you first and invite you to apply. So the process is quite simple. First, you create a Meto profile. This takes about 10 to 15 minutes to do. And this is where you share with us a little bit more about yourself. So we ask you to share with us your most recent academic scores. You can also share with us your, how much your family can contribute towards your university education per year. We also ask you to share with us other things about yourself. If you have a sense for which parts of the world you are considering, you've gotten some introductions to universities in different parts of the world just now. But also, if you have a sense for what subject areas you're interested in pursuing, you can also share that with us. And we ask you to keep your profiles updated. So always log back in whenever you receive new grades, or if anything changes, whether it's your interest or your situation, you can update your profiles. We share your profiles with our university partners, and we work with a very diverse set of institutions from all over the world. Some of the top institutions around the world, including our three guests today, as well as some of the institutions you see on the screen here. So universities look through Meto profiles and they identify students that they believe would be competitive applicants or essentially good fits for the university. And so they're looking at academics, they're looking at finances and other information that you are sharing on your profile. Once a university identifies a good fit or a student that they would like to reach out to invite them to apply, we will make an introduction. So over email, we will connect you directly to the representative at the university. And this will typically be someone in the admissions office who reads the application for your country or region and can really provide a lot of detailed information about the institution or answer your questions. And that email is essentially telling you that the university representative has looked through your Meto profile and they would like you to apply. If you are interested in a university that reaches out to you, you can express interest, you can respond to those emails and ask questions. You can also submit your application through the university's preferred platform. And we've heard a little bit about different options or different platforms that universities use. So you would need to submit your application through that, through the university's chosen portal or platform. If you are not interested in a university that reaches out to you through Meto, that's also fine. You can wait for other Meto connections to come through as well. The idea is that you might get connected to universities that you've known before, but that are really great opportunities for you. You might also get connected to a university you already knew about, but maybe you are not planning to apply. It's very encouraging to hear from the university itself that they are interested in receiving your application. You might also get connected to a university that you already knew about and you are planning to apply to. But this time you also have that one-on-one connection with someone at the university so you can follow up and ask questions, etc. So this platform is really about expanding your options, learning about different opportunities that exist out there. We provide our service to students who are in high school and are seeking undergraduate studies. So if you are in high school and your final years, this is a really great time to create your profiles. You can access the Meto platform through this link, or you can scan this QR code. Like I said, the process is quite simple, so it takes you about 10 to 15 minutes to do. For those of you who are in your final year of high school, this is really a good time for you to start creating your profiles. We expect a few of our university partners to be reaching out in the next few weeks. So please do start your profiles. If you are in your junior year or sophomore year, please also get started on your profiles, and universities will reach out to you once you get closer to your final year as well. This information will also be shared with you over email. So just want to leave you with a few things to note. So make sure that you complete the different sections of your profile in order to be visible to universities. You need to have a complete academic section. You need to make sure to have completed the financial section as well, and make sure to let us know which application cycle you are interested in or which year you would like to enter university. So for those of you who are in your final year of high school, you can select August, September 2025, which is kind of the general intake year that we consider for students who would be active applicants at this cycle. If you are in your junior year, you can select August, September 2026, all of that. So if you are taking gap years, or for sure you might not be starting in this coming application cycle, you can select the intake year that works for you. If you are unsure of how much your family can contribute towards your university education, and maybe you need to have a conversation with your family about it, this is really the best time to do so. For now, my suggestion would be to put an estimate, and a good estimate is your annual school fees at the moment. So you can put in that amount, have that conversation, come back to update your profile. You can, universities always like seeing very updated information. So whenever you receive your SAT scores or AP scores or any other grades for exams you're taking, make sure to come back to your profile and update that. And of course, like I said, you can edit your profile by accessing the platform through this link. Right, so I'm going to stop here and revert back to the questions in the chat. If any of you have questions about Meto, please also feel free to put that in the chat. So I'm just going to go through some of the questions and then hand it over to our lovely university representatives here. The first question here from Amy is, are there any good scholarships or financial aid programs in the US, UK, and Canada? So some of these questions are, things you've covered, but maybe a refresher might help. So yeah. Whoever wants to go first. Maybe you can start with Donna and then go to Holly and Leah.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you. I think it's probably important that I highlight a key difference in comparison to what Holly and Leah were talking about with their own countries, in that financial aid as a system in the UK doesn't really exist, just like Leah mentioned for Canada. So within the UK, the system for funding is generally quite limited for international students, but it is usually in the form of scholarships and would probably be on a merit basis. So it may be competitive, it may involve deadlines and application forms. There could be the odd sort of full funding available, but at undergraduate level, it is not that commonplace. So at my university, there are a limited number of undergraduate scholarships. They are partial scholarships of maybe £5,000 to £10,000, and they are for specific subject areas. So for example, I believe there's one in history and one in math. So they would have to be interested in that field to be eligible. But what I have doesn't necessarily match what the institutions in Edinburgh or across the UK would have. So this is where research is really key. So yeah, I hope that helps answer that particular question.
Yeah. Thanks, Donna.
Yes, and generally in the US, you are going to have to go institution by institution. Do they meet demonstrated financial need? Do they offer merit scholarships? There you can search, like Big Future to see if there are big, broad scholarships. But if you're looking for institutional funding, that will be institution to institution. The University of Miami, for example, we meet 100% of demonstrated financial need for all admitted students, regardless of citizenship. We also consider all admitted students for merit upon application, but that is our policy and is not replicated across the board.
Yes, I'm going to echo what my previous colleagues have said. It does vary by institution, but one great resource that I want to emphasize for Canada. So EduCanada is like our governmental website. It does have a section on scholarships, and it does highlight all of the major scholarships available across Canada. So that would be a great place to start when you're looking for scholarships. Financial aid is a bit different, and most of our financial aid would come in forms of scholarships. But as I said, it varies with each institution, and some institutions do have need-based financial aid available.
Great. Thank you. So the next question is directed specifically towards US American institutions. Does an early application to the US make a difference to my chance of getting accepted?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think in like the least satisfying way, my answer is it depends. Certainly there will be some institutions where yes, applying early will make a difference. There will be other institutions where no, honestly, it doesn't make a difference. I think if you're considering an early decision round, that is indicating that that school is your number one most favorite super special institution. And that is probably seen as a positive thing. I would also encourage, if you're considering applying to institutions in the US, looking at if there are scholarship differences between early rounds and regular rounds. For example, at the University of Miami, our early decision 1 and our early action deadlines offer the opportunity to be considered for larger merit awards than our early decision 2 or regular decision deadlines.
Great. So the next couple of questions are also directed towards you, Holly, I believe. So what competitive or entrance examinations am I supposed to give to apply to the US? And then we have another question that has to do with the estimated fee for application in the US.
Yeah, again, thank you for your questions. I can speak but from one institution. And so I think across the board for the US, a lot of institutions, many institutions use what's called a holistic review process. And what you hear at the front of that word is whole. They will, I will, we will consider the whole of what you submit. This is your academics, this is your grades, your rigor, the curriculum available to you, the context. This is your extracurricular activities, your affinities, your writing, your grammar, the story that you're telling us about yourself, how other people talk about you, your any kind of English or SAT testing that you are submitting. And so there is no singular answer to what do I have to submit to be admitted in terms of those tests. Again, look at each institution, what they require, and how they review applications. Additionally, application fees will vary from institution to institution. I would budget about $75 per institution for application fees. You also can filter in the common application by fees. If you're saying like, I actually only want to research institutions that do not have an application fee, you have that ability. But again, it will be the research into the specific institutions that will help answer that question.
Great, thank you for that. So the next question has to do with written components of applications. How early should I complete my essay or personal statement? So can start with Donna, Holly, and Leah. I'm guessing this applies to everyone here.
Thanks. This is a good question because this is a component of the UCAS application. So it is not a standalone document. It is part of the form. So you are filling it directly into the UCAS system rather than uploading a document to support it. So now they have gone through some recent changes, but ultimately, you need to have it fully completed in order to submit your application. So if you need to meet a UCAS deadline, say the 15th of October, then it needs to be completed by that time, but alongside every other element, including references and your grades and whatnot. So yeah, the UCAS deadline is the date by which you need to meet that particular personal statement requirement. I'd just like to highlight, because I didn't mention this before, the personal statement within the UCAS system is not necessarily an essay. It is about your motivations and your drive. So you might notice a different, I think in the US, there may be different requirements for different institutions. For us, we want to know what motivates you and what drives you to do the courses that you have applied to.
Thank you, Donna. The only thing I would add is you should complete your essay and personal statement early enough to edit it before you submit. That's my recommendation.
I would echo what has been shared already. I don't think I have anything to add on top of that. I always recommend you don't want to rush the process. So the earlier you start preparing, the better. So you can get a lot of feedback from your guidance counselors in case there are any changes you need to make.
Great, thank you for that. So next question is, how many universities should I apply to? In some cases, acceptance rates are low. So any recommendations?
Just from a UK perspective, you should use all 5 choices because there is a fee for the UCAS system. I think it's around £25. It would be a real shame not to maximize your choices on that. I do think there is a smaller fee for one institution on UCAS if you want to apply to just the one. But my recommendation is to use all 5. On that, but obviously that is a personal choice. No one is forcing you to use all 5, but that would be my suggestion. What I will say is although my university does publish acceptance rates for bachelor's students and bachelor's programs for guidance, across the UK, acceptance rates is not something we discuss that often. It's not something that we really use in the same way as other study destinations. So you might not find that particular information available for every UK university.
I would also say this is part of the research you need to do. Are you a competitive applicant at all of these institutions you're expecting to apply to? I would not encourage you to use all 20 spaces of the common application. That is going to bloat the denominator, which therefore drops the acceptance rates when institutions have more and more and more applications every year, at least in the United States, where I know acceptance rates are talked about all the time. So I would highly encourage, if you have a counselor, if you have someone who can guide you, who can offer some support, I would certainly encourage you to lean on their expertise.
I am going to echo the UK side. So I think Canada is very similar to that. Acceptance rates is not a terminology that we typically would use. Actually, I think we're more rolling admissions basis than acceptance rates. So when you're looking at Canada, I'm not going to say, oh, apply to as many universities as possible. That will even out your chances. I think that the application fee is very expensive for Canada. So you definitely want to make an informed decision of where you're going. What are their academic requirements? We publish our academic requirements everywhere. For students who meet those academic requirements, your chances of getting accepted are quite high. So just do a little bit of research. It does vary across universities, but I don't think the terminology of acceptance rates is a Canadian terminology we would use.
Great, thank you for that. The next question has to do with postgraduate studies. Where should I begin my journey to apply for a master's degree in the US or Canada?
Oh, so in like the least helpful answer, like Google, honestly, I do not have a very satisfying answer here, in that I have only worked in the undergraduate admissions space, and I don't necessarily think my own higher education journey is applicable. But Leah, maybe you have something more useful.
I'm not sure if it's something similar in the US, but in Canada, we do have a Study in Canada website. So Edu Canada is where I recommend starting your journey for anything. So if you're looking to study in Canada, they have resources for all levels. So if you're looking at a graduate program, you can look at that website.
Great, thank you. So the next question has to do with an international student who is homeschooled. And the question is around kind of testing and whether or not they would need to take A levels versus the AS. I think the student is particularly in the Cambridge system. But maybe we can take this opportunity to like comment also around testing requirements, whether it's standardized tests or the kind of like stronger or what would be considered a strong applicant testing wise. So we could all kind of take turns to answer this question.
Yeah, I guess because it was geared towards the US, I'll like hop in, but also say that I do not work for MIT or any of the Ivy League or the UC system. I know the UCs have very clear requirements on their websites throughout the whole system, the A through Gs. So I would encourage you to take a look there. I know that MIT now requires the SAT or ACT again. They just published some recent results related to that. And then I do not know much about the Ivy League requirements. They all compete in the same football conference. That's about as far as I've got. But in terms of testing broadly, what I want to say regarding SAT, ACT test optional policies is in the US, when we say it's test optional, we truly do mean optional. If we as an institution have not gone back to requiring an SAT or ACT, that means it is optional. You do not need to fly to another country. You do not need to drive across a border to find a testing center. We are able to evaluate your application holistically, basically across the board, without that test. I would encourage you, if there are specific institutions, and I'll use MIT because it was written here, they do require that SAT again, and therefore you will need to take it. Related to A levels, we will look at the context of your institution, right? If you are at an A level institution, we will not expect to see an IB diploma because that's not what is offered. And so it will be context specific, at least in that holistic review in the US. But I guess I'll turn it over to Donna to hear the UK perspective.
Thanks, Holly. Obviously, we deal a lot with A-levels in the UK as it's one of the standard, particularly English school education systems. So broadly speaking, and I can't speak for all institutions here, but broadly speaking, we'd be looking for 3 full A-levels. So an AS is basically the first half of an A-level, so the first year of 2. We would not, certainly not at my institution, be able to take a student with just AS levels, so we would be encouraging students to complete the A levels. However, if you had the A levels, doing something additional such as SATs or ACTs on top of that would probably not be required, although it could potentially make you more competitive. But we do come across students all the time that have a combination of qualifications, but again, I'm talking about a full A level, not an AS level. So I met some students just the other day who are doing a mixture of A levels and SATs, but it must be the full A level to be considered. And I would expect that may be the standard across the UK, but you would need to check individual universities to be sure.
So if I was to add, so I know you mentioned like, do we the question about like whether we value certain curriculums over others. I know we often talk about A levels or IB or some of the other more well-known curriculums, but I will say in Canada we do look at we do consider every curriculum that's accredited by either the government or the institution. So if you're not necessarily taking IB or A levels, but you're taking a government accredited curriculum, like the national curriculum of your country, we will still consider that and we will still assess you for that. And we still could offer scholarships as well for that. But I would say on our website, we have a great tool. So if you're looking to study in Canada, I still recommend it because that tool does tell you all the requirements you need based on your academic background. And a lot of universities in Canada have this tool. So you can go to either York, I've seen it in Brock, I've seen it at Carleton, but just enter your academic background, your program of interest, get details, and it will tell you exactly what you need for each curriculum that you're studying in.
Great, thank you. So we are at time, but we do have one last question that maybe our US and Canadian university representatives can answer. Question is, how much do US and Canadian universities care about extracurriculars?
In a classic response, it depends. So there are going to be some institutions that will care quite a bit. How will you contribute to their community, especially if it's a residential one? How have you already demonstrated a commitment to a community, whether that's your home community, your school community, a broader ethnic, racial, religious community? But then there will be other institutions that look at your academics and that's about it, to look just at your essays. I would say in general, there is an excitement to understand how students will contribute to their campus community and get involved in the United States.
I would say share it's a similar sentiment in Canada. I would say scholarships play a big deal when it comes to, extracurricular activities play a big deal when it comes to scholarship applications. So when we're looking at scholarship applications for those high value scholarships, we are looking for well-rounded students who are involved in their community outside of the classroom. That's when it does play a key role. But when it comes to admissions to a degree program, it is strictly based on academics as well as just something that, depending on the program, it'll be key on your academics for admission. So I would say the scholarships would be a great resource for the extracurricular activities would be a great resource for your scholarships.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for all the questions and for the answers to the university representatives. I'll hand it back over to ZNotes.
Okay. So thank you for all your great questions. We apologize if we couldn't address each one, but we hope you found the session valuable. A big thank you to our audience for joining us, to our esteemed speakers for their time and expertise, and to Meto for partnering with us on this event. So before we conclude, please take a moment to complete the survey by scanning the QR code on your screen. Your feedback helps us continue improving these sessions. Once again, thank you for being with us today. We look forward to seeing you at future events. Have a wonderful day. So, thank you once again.